많이 좋아했어요.
많이 들으셨던 명곡이에요.
Music has such a fascinating power. Music brings back what it was like for you and what was going on at the time, and even the looks of the faces you were with when listening to it.
무대 위에 정적만이 남아있죠.
Today is the day we take ourselves deep down memory lane.
내다보는 거. 지금은 알 수 없어.
The old memories I ran into out of the blue added so much excitement to the day.
It's April 8th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's snap presidential election date. Acting President Duck-soo will formally announce June 3rd as the election day this morning. That means the election campaign will begin on May 12th, with early voting to take place on May 29th and 30th. U.S. President Donald Trump is now threatening to slap an additional 50% tariff on China, expressing his willingness to negotiate tariffs with all countries but China. And countries around the world are actively reaching out to Trump ahead of the April 9th reciprocal tariffs. And the EU is now also offering to remove tariffs on all industrial goods from the U.S. The government is likely to confirm the date of an early presidential election in June. This after now former President Yoon Suk Yeol was removed from office last Friday due to his December martial law declaration. We have our correspondent Oh Soo-young on the line. Good morning, Soo-young.
Good morning, Tammy.
So, Soo-young, so the highly anticipated early election date is more likely to be fixed in the next half hour or so, correct?
Yes, Tammy, that's exactly what we're expecting. But before we begin, we just heard some breaking news that the acting president and Prime Minister Duck-soo, he's just appointed the Constitutional Court Justice nominee Ma Eun-hyuk after months of controversy over his previous refusal to appoint the left-leaning nominee, he has now decided to appoint him, which is what the opposition party has been pushing for many weeks. And I'll be bringing you details about that later. But yes, getting back to the next presidential election, the 21st presidential election of Korea. Now, Han Duck-soo is expected to declare June 3rd as the day of an early presidential election, and that would come 4 days after former President Yoon Suk Yeol was removed from power on Friday. Now, under the Constitution, the date must be announced within 10 days of a presidential vacancy and at least 50 days before the vote. That means Han actually has until next Monday to settle on a date, but there's been a lot of pressure to quickly fill the leadership vacuum as former President Yoon was suspended from his duties for almost 4 months throughout his impeachment trial. An election on Tuesday, the 3rd of June, would mark the latest possible day within the 60-day window set out by the Constitution. And this, of course, would be aimed at ensuring the people's right to vote. Normally, presidential elections in Korea are held on a Wednesday, but in the case of early elections, if they're triggered by a presidential vacancy, then there aren't any separate regulations concerning the day of the week. In 2017, for example, an early presidential election took place also after the ousting of a former president, President Park Geun-hye, and the election date was announced 5 days after the Constitutional Court upheld her impeachment, and the vote itself took place exactly 60 days following the ruling.
Soo-young, you will have to update us on the Prime Minister and Acting President Han Duck-soo's appointment on Justice nominee Ma Eun-hak. For the meantime, we are waiting for him to announce the exact date for the election, June 3rd, likely to be the big day. What comes after the date is set?
Well, it's going to be an incredibly compact campaigning period. I mean, if the presidential election is held on June 3rd, then candidate registrations, they're going to begin on May 10th and run for 2 days, so until May 11th. And the official campaigning period then would start the next day for just over 3 weeks until June 2nd, which would be the day before the vote. During this time, there are going to be televised interviews, debates hosted by electoral authorities. Overseas Koreans must register to vote 40 days before Election Day, according to the National Election Commission, and ballots for them will open from May 20th to the 25th. Now, early voting will start the weekend before for 2 days on May 29th and 30th. In an early election, the winner has to assume presidential duties immediately without a transition committee. In 2017, former President Moon Jae-in began his presidential duties the day after the vote. So right after the Election Commission confirmed his victory on May 10th. Now, once the election date is confirmed, the National Election Commission is expected to release the full election schedule.
I see. Once confirmed, we will bring our viewers the latest, of course. Thank you, Soo-young, for the coverage. U.S. President Donald Trump has made it clear that there is no change of a plan for his reciprocal tariffs. He further warned of an extra 50% tariff on China, while opening the door for negotiations with other trading partners. Our Moon Hadong reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed that the sweeping tariffs announced last week will be rolled out without delay and threatened further import taxes on China. Taking to social media on Monday, he said that Washington could impose an additional 50% tariff on Beijing unless it withdraws its retaliatory 34% tariffs on U.S. goods. The escalation of the trade war between the two countries brings the total rate levied on Chinese imports to 104%. This is expected to have a staggering impact, as China was the second largest trading partner with the U.S. last year. Trump also warned that unless Beijing accepts his demands, its negotiations with the U.S. will come to a standstill. Meanwhile, negotiations with other countries are due to begin immediately. South Korea is among the countries that may engage in negotiations with the U.S., as its Minister for Trade is scheduled to meet with the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Office of the United States Trade Representative in the coming days. Talking with reporters at the airport ahead of his flight to Washington, Minister Chung In-kyo discussed Seoul's strategy for the upcoming talks, including increasing LNG imports from the U.S.
In order to reduce U.S. tariffs, we need to reduce the U.S. trade deficit, which, from our perspective, is a trade surplus. Since it is difficult to reduce our exports, we must increase our imports. In that regard, we have been reviewing various packages to help resolve the trade balance issue.
Starting from Wednesday, the U.S. will levy rates exceeding the 10% baseline for reciprocal tariffs. For South Korea, a total tariff rate of 25% will apply. During a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump said that these levies will be implemented as planned, but he was open to fair deals.
We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals, and in certain cases they're going to be paying substantial tariffs. There'll be fair deals.
This marks a shift from earlier statements which said that there would be no negotiations for the time being. During interviews with various media outlets, White House officials said that such deals would need to be really great for American manufacturing and farmers, and countries would need to do more than just lowering their tariffs for relief. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And with rising trade tensions, South Korean authorities are rolling out measures to support local businesses. And during an economic ministerial meeting on Tuesday, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok pointed out that concerns are rising about the impact on domestic industries of the higher-than-expected U.S. reciprocal tariffs. As a result, Seoul will be allocating approximately 3 to 4 trillion Korean won, or over $2 billion in a supplementary budget next week to stabilize supply chains and provide support for SMEs. In another meeting with finance chiefs, Choi called for close monitoring of the volatile stock market in response to trade uncertainties. And countries around the world are moving quickly to talk Trump out of the upcoming reciprocal tariffs that are about to be effective in the coming day. Lee Seung-jae has this report.
After the announcement of sweeping reciprocal tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump last week, countries are looking to negotiate a deal before April 9th, when the tariffs go into effect. The European Union, in the hopes of striking a deal with the U.S., said Monday that it has offered 0-for-0 tariffs for industrial goods. The announcement was made by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who stressed that such deals were done successfully with other countries in the past. The U.S. and the EU were close to removing tariffs on all industrial goods a decade ago during the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership talks, but this was ultimately scrapped by Trump in his first term. In response to Trump's automobile tariffs, the UK government said Monday it would relax electric vehicle sales targets in order to help its domestic auto industry. The ban on selling new gas and diesel cars will still come into effect in 2030, but automakers will now have more flexibility on annual targets. Currently, 28% of new cars sold in the UK in 2025 must be electric, as the target will rise annually until 2030. However, automakers will be given more freedom on how they meet their annual targets. This means that if they don't sell enough EVs in 1 year, they can make it up by selling more next year. Also, a penalty of £15,000 or $19,000 per vehicle sold that does not meet the latest emissions standards will be cut to just over $15,000. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba held phone talks on Monday, where the Japanese leader voiced his disappointment over the tariffs. Ishiba told Trump that Japan has been the biggest investor in the U.S. for 5 straight years, and that his tariff policies could hurt Japanese companies and their investments. During the 25-minute call, the two leaders also agreed on constructive dialogue on the matter, with Ishiba sending a team to negotiate with the U.S. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So Japan is one of the first countries to ask Trump to rethink his tariffs. Will any of the at least 50 countries looking to negotiate with the U.S. be able to get out of Trump's tariffs? Let's turn to Professor Kim Won this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Why are some countries like India and Indonesia choosing to talk it out when countries like China and Canada are responding with retaliatory tariffs?
Well, the choice between negotiation and retaliation depends a lot on the economic situations as well as the beliefs that they have about their counterparty. So in this case, the U.S. sends a signal about fixing this trade deficits, otherwise we will impose the tariffs, and it's a very strong signal. And then this type of the signaling game typically considered in economics say about two possible outcomes. One is separating case where one country imposes tariff and the other actually is negotiates, and the other type is tariff war, meaning imposing tariffs to each other very heavily. And typically one of the decision factors between these two is probably this length of this type of the war or the period of this retaliation. So in case of China, because of this perennial sort of trade imbalances, they know that it's not going to be a short term, so they're likely to actually into this war, while the other countries think that it's more likely short term and then leading to agreement. So there's a chance that it's going to have more negotiating type of strategy.
Trade deficit is a term that we have to, pay our attention to. That is why Trump is so firm on not willing to make a deal with China unless that trade deficit disappears. The question is, how can that be solved using Trump's method then?
So I looked at the past data, and then the U.S. trade imbalance with China really increased and started, I think, in 1990s. Before, I think the biggest country of the trade deficit against the U.S. was Japan. After the Plaza Accord, if we remember, in 1985 to 7, by pushing the Japanese yen's value, I think it was kind of fixed, and then there were actually some reductions in trade imbalances, and then it started going up with the emergence of the Chinese cheap products actually imported. So, of course, it benefits a lot of the U.S. consumers, but then I think as we know now, the trade imbalance problem is very severe. So I guess the tariff actually is going to be kind of something similar to the currency, devaluation or appreciation type of things.
Sure.
And I think that Trump is looking at really old time, in 1930s or something, to actually have the kind of some nice effects of the restoring the trade imbalance. I don't know how well it's going to work given this globalization of all the parts inside of any products, but at least I think it's going to have some impact similar to the currency devaluation.
But Trump's definitely betting on that. Now, this is just an opinion released by the Wall Street Journal. But apparently, according to that opinion, Trump's global trade war is a strategic gift to Chinese President Xi Jinping in a way that Trump's trade partners, around the world could turn to China for cooperation. Will China be a winner here? What do you think?
Well, I also read that article and the opinion part. I doubt a bit. I mean, there's clearly some effects, but I don't think it's going to be that easy for China to convince other trading partners, because if you look at the trading balance between China and other countries, it's also similar in that they're actually making huge surplus. So if this is going to be resolved with the U.S. for somehow, I think, partnering with especially the Europe, it's going to be the next turn that they have to fight with Europe. I don't think this is going to basically just lead to the clear winning system. Anyway, tariff war always leads to loss at the end of the day. So, but I think the U.S. clearly has very pinpointed target against China. So I'm not sure if this strategical alliance with the Europe is going to really work. But there's a point I can see, right?
And I'm sure Trump is not going to just sit there, easily let China become a winner. But the question is, how will he make sure that China doesn't become a winner here?
Yeah, so I think, clearly, as you already mentioned in the very beginning, they already started threatening, slapping with another 50%, amounting to 100% or something. I know it's a bit too much, but anyway, so they'll just keep doing this. So I don't know how things will end, but clearly this usually leads to some sudden end sometimes, or it's going to have really big impact, and already business leaders in the U.S. start making comments about this. So there will be some mediations, but for the time being, it's going to be very unclear. So clearly there will be some types of the tariffs or regulations very heavy against China, and China is going to have some negative impacts because at the end of the day, yes, China is somewhat sustainable, but if we look at their growth patterns, it's been very driven by exports. So without the exports, they're not going to grow, unlike the other cases like US. So I don't think it's going to be a very positive case for China. For the time being, they may have some silver lining though.
Sure. Well, there's that for China. For us, South Korea, the trade minister is heading to the U.S. once again this week to sort things out with the Trump administration. Now, what kind of strategy or approach do you think South Korea should take to convince U.S. officials at this time? We've tried multiple times, as you know.
To be honest, I don't know, but at least I think that reducing the information gap is very important. I remember in the inaugural speech of the President Trump, I think he was talking about like 4 times higher tariffs or non-tariff like barriers or something. At least, both, the parties should be, both countries actually should have the symmetric information. So where this, number comes from, and this kind of things at least will reduce the information gaps so that there will be more negotiations. Second, clearly export part is not going to be all of a sudden changing, but then, import can increase. And at least I remember the South Korea has huge trade deficits against like Japan or something. So if there are some ways in the short term to shift the import partners from like Japan or other perennial the red actually deficit countries to U.S., I think the probably South Korean government should actively pursue that or show the effort.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning. You enjoy your evening there.
Thank you.
And in other news, South Korea's current account stayed in the black for the 22nd month in a row in February. According to data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, the country logged a $7.2 billion current account surplus in the second month of the year. This marks a sharp increase from January's surplus, thanks to the easing of disruptions caused by fewer working days during the Lunar New Year holiday the month before. It also comes as exports rose 3.6% compared to the previous month on a strong demand for computers, pharmaceuticals, cars, and IT equipment. Samsung Electronics, in its earnings guidance on Tuesday, estimated a first quarter operating profit of 6.6 trillion Korean won, or roughly $4.5 billion. The figure beats market expectations of around $3.5 billion, thanks to strong sales of the tech giant's latest flagship smartphones, despite being down 0.15% from a year earlier. The market had projected weaker earnings due to delayed shipments of its 5th-gen HBM chips and falling memory prices, but brisk sales of the Galaxy S25 launched in February pushed the results well above forecasts. Revenue rose nearly 10% on-year to 79 trillion won, or around $54 billion, close to an all-time high of 79.1 trillion won posted in the third quarter of last year. Firefighters are still trying to contain the wildfire burning in Hadong County, Gyeongbokgung Province. According to forestry authorities, a level 2 wildfire alert was issued after fire broke out at around noon on Monday. 36 helicopters were deployed to extinguish the fire, which affected 66 hectares of land. That's equivalent to around 92 soccer fields. Firefighters are struggling to fully contain the fire due to the wind. And meanwhile, donations collected for the recovery and support following last month's massive wildfires in South Korea's southeastern regions have reached 112.4 billion won, or over $76 million. The amount marks the largest ever collection of relief donations. Now, for those of you here in Seoul looking for a peaceful place to indulge in books, the King Study at Gyeongbokgung Palace is open as a small public library. Our Choi So-young tells us more.
Spring has arrived in Gyeongbokgung Palace. This part of the palace is called Jibokje, which means collecting precious jewels such as jade. It is connected with Parujong, an octagonal two-story pavilion, and Hyopgildang Hall, showcasing a distinctive traditional architectural beauty. Inside the buildings, over 1,000 books fill the walls, and people look around and read. From April 2nd, the Jibokje has been opened as a small library. Here, visitors can read books, relax, and enjoy a moment of peace. The low ceilings gives visitors a cozy feeling and lets them see the beautiful tancheong, traditional Korean patterns, up close.
I think it's, peaceful, quiet. I feel lucky to be here, actually. So I choose other books like poem, just to see how it's writing.
We came here to enjoy the nice weather and also to learn more about our culture. The atmosphere is very calm and peaceful, and it feels like the perfect place to relax. We are having a really great time.
Since 2016, the Korea Heritage Service has opened this space for free to allow visitors to experience the palace more closely. This building was built in 1881 and was used by King Gojong as a study and to receive foreign envoys. It closed during the COVID-19 pandemic but reopened in 2022. Currently, this place has over 1,700 books related to the history of the Joseon dynasty and royal family.
It also offers books for children, foreign language translations, and rare resources such as the annals of the Joseon dynasty, which are not easily found elsewhere.
The office plans to hold programs such as Meet the Author events and book talks at the library. The Jibokje Small Library will be open until October 31st, except in July and August. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened at the White House to address a wide range of issues, including the Gaza conflict and Iran's nuclear ambitions. During their meeting on Monday at the Oval Office, Trump announced the initiation of direct talks with Iran over its nuclear program, with high-level discussions scheduled to begin on Saturday. Netanyahu expressed conditional support for the diplomatic efforts, stating that preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear capabilities through diplomatic means would be favorable. The leaders also discussed the ongoing conflict in Gaza, and Netanyahu highlighted Israel's commitment to securing the release of hostages held by Hamas and mentioned its ongoing military operations aimed at achieving this objective. The U.S. president once again expressed his desire for the U.S. to take over the Gaza Strip, saying that it would be a good thing. In the Middle East, a Palestinian-American teenager was fatally shot by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. On Sunday evening local time, a 14-year-old U.S. citizen from New Jersey was shot and killed near the town of Tormos Aya, northeast of Ramallah. According to the Israel Defense Forces, soldiers identified 3 individuals throwing rocks at civilian vehicles on a nearby highway. The IDF said its soldiers opened fire during a counterterrorism operation in the area after spotting 3 terrorist individuals who were throwing rocks at the highway. The mayor of Tormos Aya said 3 teenagers were shot on this day, resulting in 1 death and injuries to 2 others. The Palestinian Ministry of Health called the shooting an extrajudicial killing. India's northern regions, including the capital Delhi, are experiencing an unseasonal heat wave with temperatures soaring to unprecedented levels for early April. On Monday, Delhi recorded a maximum temperature of over 40 degrees Celsius, marking the highest of the season and exceeding the average temperature for this time of year by about 5 degrees. The India Meteorological Department has issued heat wave alerts for several northern and central states, forecasting temperatures to reach up to 42 degrees Celsius in the coming days. Authorities are advising residents to avoid heat exposure, stay hydrated, and wear lightweight clothing.
Cherry blossoms are in full bloom, lighting up the streets of the capital area. It's the perfect time to soak in the beauty of spring. But when you do head out, those in western regions and Gangwon province need to keep a face mask handy as the dust levels could spike at times. Meanwhile, a dry advisory has been reissued in parts of Gyeongsang-do and Daegu. And along with dry and windy conditions, even a small spark can quickly spread, so please be cautious. The afternoon highs will rise to 19 degrees Celsius here in the capital, Daegu, Gyeongju, both seeing highs of 23 degrees. Then cloudy skies will turn much sunnier as the day goes on today. Then we'll see nationwide showers between tomorrow and Thursday, and there's another round of rain expected for this weekend as well. As we are expecting frequent rain this week, which could cause the cherry blossom petals to fall earlier than we'd like, you might want to head out sooner rather than later to catch the blossoms at their peak.
That's all we have for this morning. Thank you for watching.
산에 오면 굉장히 일단 자연의 소리로 가득 차고 조용하거든요. 저도 그렇고 많은 사람들이 산을 통해서 많은 에너지를 얻고 또 다시 일상으로 돌아갔을 때 리프레시하는 그런 것들을 많이 얻어가는 것 같아요. 어느 날부터는 이런 아름다운 풍경 속에 정말 이질적인 하나의 모습이 눈에 들어오더라고요. 우리 인간들이 버린 쓰레기들. 제가 좋아하는 산을 즐기기만 하는 게 아니라 계속 즐기려면 제가 지켜야 하는 부분이 있으니까 나라도 조금 무언가를 해보자. 그리고 마음이 맞는 사람들이랑 같이 한 번에 변화시킬 수는 없을지라도 뭔가 우리가 계속 할 수 있는 일들을 해보자라고 했던 게 클린 하이킹이었던 것 같아요. 결국에는 사람들이 쉽게 사용했다가 내가 즐기고 맛보고 그냥 쉽게 편하게 사용하고 버려지는 것들이 가장 불편하기도 하고 우리가 심각하다고 생각하는 부분인 것 같아요. 쓰레기들을 보면 화가 나기도 하지만 또 이게 혼자 줍는 게 아니라 같이 줍다 보면 되게 재밌는 부분이 정말 오래된 막 50년도 더 된 쓰레기들을 발굴을 할 때가 있거든요. 2001년! 2001년! 우리가 태어난 연도보다 더 오래된 것들도 있고 이러다 보니까 같이 줍다 보면 더 그런 특이한 쓰레기, 재밌는 쓰레기를 찾으려고 게임처럼 막 하게 돼요. 자주 산을 찾고 자연을 찾고 즐기는 것도 중요하지만 조금 더 산을 사랑할 수 있는 쉬운 실천법들이 있거든요. 자연 속에서 자신도 즐기고 또 자연을 지킬 수 있는 활동을 좀 더 놀이로서 재밌고 즐겁고 유쾌하게 이런 환경이라는 게 너무 딱딱하고 내가 뭔가 힘을 들여서 해야 되는 일이 아니라 우리가 즐기면서 함께 할 수 있는 놀이처럼 그렇게 느낄 수 있는 자리를 많이 마련하는 그런 클린 하이커가 되고 싶습니다.
나는 쓰레기로 보는 클린 하이커!
We're here to bring a new type of news show. New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Tuesday, April 8th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and thank you for starting your morning with News Generation. Joining us today is Kwon Ji-yeon.
Hello, Eugene.
Hello, Ji-yeon. And Im Sang-young.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. That both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As usual, we're going to begin our Tuesday with our keyword news. Our keyword today is election. Following the Constitutional Court's decision last Friday to uphold former President Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment, South Korea is now required to hold a snap presidential election within 60 days. And as of now, Tuesday, June 3rd, appears to be the most likely date. Citing an unnamed government official, Yonhap News Agency reported on Monday that a motion to hold the election on that date will be submitted and voted on during Tuesday's cabinet meeting. June 3rd is the last day the election could be held based on the 60-day constitutional deadline. So I want to ask you, Sang-yeong, what are your expectations heading into this snap election? Do you think we'll face a very tight race just like we saw back in 2022?
Right, so now we don't have the final list of candidates for the next election, so I think it's kind of premature to say who's going to actually win for the next election. But I agree that depending on the outcome, many things will change. If I recall the election that was held right after the impeachment of President Park Geun-hye, then candidate Moon Jae-in outperformed all the other candidates at the time, since the right-wing party was undergoing chaos and dispersed, and the right-wing party was divided into multiple and small-sized conservative groups. And although Hong Joon-pyo was on the second place with 24% supporting rate at the time, it was no match for Moon Jae-in's 41%. So this time, I assume that the People Power Party will try to consolidate its member and to bring up a promising candidate that could compete against the figure from Democratic Party, which everyone is expecting to be Lee Jae-myung.
So we will have to keep an eye on which candidates will be the front runners for the two major parties. Now, what do you think, Jian?
Well, it's certainly a very important, sensitive and delicate moment for this country, Korea. Well, given the circumstances now, a snap election was inevitable. And we might be in it for another nail-biter, just like in 2022. And public sentiments are divided at this very moment.
Right.
And, the outcome could hinge on turnout. That said, I'd rather reserve my judgment until the candidates and platforms are clear. So it's indeed a waiting time, truly, indeed, for all of us.
A lot to look forward to, right?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Right. So if the snap election is set for June 3rd, which the announcement will likely be announced today, candidates must register by May 11th, and the official campaign period will run from May 12th to June 2nd. And any public official wishing to run must resign from their post by May 4th, and once a winner is confirmed, the new president will begin his or her term immediately. And that was our keyword news for this Tuesday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Tuesday means it's time to tap into what's trending on Korea's cultural front. Take a look at the screen for more on today's topic. Last Saturday, April 5th, was Arbor Day here in Korea. It was first celebrated in 1946 to highlight the importance of trees, forests, and protecting our green spaces. These days, one simple way people are embracing nature is by keeping plants, not just as decoration, but as companions. That's right, we are talking about pet plants. So this year, the message of Arbor Day hit a little differently. With Korea recently dealing with devastating wildfires, more people are thinking seriously about our relationship with nature. So starting off, Jiyeon, could you please walk us through the latest situation on South Korea's wildfires?
Of course. Well, in fact, Arbor Day it is observed to encourage the cherishing and careful cultivation of trees. Unfortunately, wildfires recently swept through northern Gyeongbokgung province in Korea for several days, causing death and widespread damage. It was especially heartbreaking to see centuries-old trees and countless plants consumed by the flames, that is. And more recently, wildfires in Hadong and Hadong in Gyeongsang-namdo province prompt emergency response efforts to prevent secondary damage from expected heavy rain. This disaster reminds us how delicate nature is and how important it is to take care of our environment.
And as we just saw on New Day at Arirang, firefighters are bracing to contain another wildfire that happened in the region. And also strong winds are in the forecast today, which is really raising concerns about possible wildfire outbreaks once again. But they're not just an issue in Korea, because Hanya, we've been seeing them break out in other parts of the world, right?
Right. So wildfires have been going rampant last year, especially. So around 64,000 wildfire cases were reported in the U.S. For the year 2024 alone. And most of these fires broke out on the West Coast area, ranging from Oregon to Southern California. And in 2023, Maui Island, Hawaii, was also struck with severe wildfire, and more than 100 people got killed. In the same year, Canada also went through record-breaking wildfires, and about 18 million hectares were burned, and experts say that these wildfires are the result of a climate crisis that we're seeing right now.
Right. So now we're going to head back to the growing trend of pet plants, because keeping plants at home or in the office isn't new, but now people are treating them more like pets, that is, in other words, like family. And this trend seems to be especially popular among young people, right?
That's right. Well, this is kind of a trend, kind of a thing that you post on your social network these days. Well, it's incredibly popular, especially among the younger generation. According to a survey by the Rural Development Administration, around 17 million people in South Korea now keep plants at their home. And take a look at this. Those in their 30s and under make up the largest group, that is at 37%. And, you know, think about it. Traditionally, looking after plants was regarded more as a hobby for older adults or people with a home-based lifestyle. But now, the younger generation, the MZ generation, is leading this trend this way, even surpassing the 40s and at 34% and the 50s at just 15%. But personally, I must say, I wasn't always into plants myself. I could hardly keep one alive, but now I have so many pots in my house. Well, I started getting into this plant, taking care of the house plants now, because what really sparked my interest in this area was when my mom and dad exhibited a garden piece at the Goyang International Flower Expo. They have exhibited a garden piece, art piece, under the name of Father's Arm, Father's Embrace. And that was kind of a good experience for me, getting into this area, this houseplants area.
So you've now become a plant parent as well.
Yes, that is right.
And not to mention that I have my pet cactus right on my desk, even though you can't see. And Sang-Yeon, I also want to ask you, are you noticing that more young people are becoming plant parents?
Yeah, so if we look at another survey that was carried out by the University Tomorrow, 20s lab targeting the MZ generation, over half said they were currently growing pet plants like Eugene. So as interest in pet plants continues to grow, so does the number of plant clinics, places that diagnose plant health and offer tips on how to care your plants. This is much like animal hospitals.
Right.
And in addition, plant growing devices are also gaining popularity as well.
plant clinics, very interesting. So we are not alone on this pet plant trend. But I think that one of the biggest curiosities people have about this topic is what's the difference between a house plant and having a pet plant? And I also want to ask you, why do you think more young people are now interested in adopting plants as
plants, looking after those pet plants? I think there are many reasons, but the number one reason for that is their emotional comfort and connection between the plants. With more people living alone and many in the so-called give-up generation, choosing not to marry or have children, plants offer a gentle alternative. You know, pets can be a burden sometimes, not only in terms of cost, but also the worrying of leaving them alone while at work or school. However, on the other hand, plants are low maintenance, affordable, and still offer a sense of companionship. And personally, I love that because they are so good for kids' education while they teach responsibility and clean the air of my house out. No greetings, no fuss, just a bit of care, attention, water. They quietly make your space better, feel like you're home.
And a little bit of sunshine too.
That is exactly right.
Then Sang-hye, I want to ask you, when did this trend really start to bloom?
Well, actually, it started to increase as more and more people spent more time in home during COVID-19 season. In fact, between 2019 and 2020, before and after the onset of the pandemic, the plant growing device market grew from $7 million to $40 million. As people spend more time at home, more began to find comfort through green therapy, simply watching their plants grow. And numerous international studies have shown that plants can reduce stress and lower the blood pressure. They're also highly effective in purifying the air and enhancing interior aesthetics.
They can indeed be a very big source of healing and comfort as well. Now I want to ask you, what about outside Korea? Is this plant parenting trend also big in other countries as well?
The answer is yes. It is quite popular around the world right now. Well, especially during the pandemic. For example, in the US, a plant care application powered by artificial intelligence was launched back in 2020. And users could register their plant's name and get personalized, customized care advice because they got this information, sunlight levels, window direction, temperature, humidity, even pot size. Because these are the things that the plant owners ask themselves or would like to ask to the experts. And in just 1 year, over 22,000 plant species were registered in this application, which is quite something. So a green thumb, more like a smartphone, because these days apps do the gardening just for you.
And the market is definitely expanding.
That's right.
Then I want to ask you, Sang-hye, are young people overseas also interested in plant parenting?
Definitely. So according to the reports from Utah, 7 out of 10 millennials consider themselves plant parents. Now, this term is relatively new expression referring to people who develop a sense of connection by raising a plant. And NBC also analyzed the plant parent trend, saying that it gives people a sense of control over at least one part of their lives because many younger generation are living through a hard time these days. I think the fact that you can grow plants and controlling a bit of your lifestyle gives them a comfort and a relief, even though it may seem too trivial.
Absolutely. So looking at the bigger picture, it's really fascinating to think about how the word pet used to mean just dogs or cats, but now it includes plants too. Then I think this leads us to our next question, what's next? And we asked our viewers if they have any non-traditional pets. Here's what 3 of them had to share. Our first comment for this Tuesday is by studio visionary Anna. I have my 3 pink baby blankets from when I was born. They're very comforting to me and still in very good condition despite being 19 years old. Daniel Kongim says music because it does some serious deep healing. I understand why music is used for therapy sometimes. Country Hour Day 69 says plushies. Whenever I feel upset, I can just hug them and take a nap. Wow, so from pet blankets to music and even plushies, a lot of new non-conventional definition of pets. After the break, we're going to bring in a millennial from Australia for more on this pet plant trend. Stay tuned.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. click community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
We're pleased to welcome Peter Michaels, an Australian millennial living in Korea, to our show today. Welcome back to the show, Peter.
Thank you for having me back again.
Thank you for joining us. So, Peter, we first want to ask you, is the pet plant trend big in Australia too? And we also want to ask you, do you have a pet plant of your own?
So I think it hasn't been a trend, but it's been more of a movement for the last more over a decade now. You can see it a bit more in the office space now as well. When I was living in Australia, my last job, we had a lot of plants around the office. So I think it's moving into that sort of direction where even the office space is getting a bit more greener. And on your second point, we have a lot of plants in the cafe here, but at home we don't have too many. But I do want to get some more into that plant because of the fact that there's a lot of those health benefits, as you guys were mentioning.
Well, Peter, I've got to confess that sometimes I say I love you to my plants sometimes, but then why do you think people are getting so emotionally attached to their plants these days?
I think it's because of the fact that the health reasons and the things that they can connect to the plants, and then they can treat it like their little baby, I guess you could say. As you were saying before, the plant baby. People treat animals as their pets and their little children as well. So I think this is just a different way to connect to something with how the world is going in towards mental health is becoming more of a big thing in the world, if that makes sense.
Okay, Peter, so I think many people are now growing their own plants just like you. But do you think this trend will stick around for some time, or do you think it will fade away soon?
Excuse me. I think, like I was just saying before, it's not a trend as much. It's probably become more of a trend since the pandemic, but as in Australia, it's probably been more of a movement. So I think as a trend, it will fade a little bit, but as a movement, it will become more ingrained in the society that we live in. Because I know that in some of the buildings that we're seeing in Europe, especially, and some in Sydney as well, we see that some of the outsides of the buildings have plants on them. So it's kind of helping incorporate it into the buildings and how we live. So I think as a trend, yes, maybe it's short term, but as a movement, I think we're going to see a lot more plants incorporated into our society.
All right, Peter, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so tying our main discussion back to Arbor Day and to the environment, caring for plants is one way to live greener, but our ultimate goal is to protect the planet for the next new generation, the future generation. So ending off our episode today, what are some practical things we can do in our everyday lives to care for the environment?
Well, of course, keeping houseplants at your place is kind of a lovely way to bring nature into your space, our lives. But it's just one small step. We need to think bigger. We need to draw this big picture for the environment, about the park. Think about the parks, the forest, and the oceans as well. Small changes in our routines, like cutting down on plastic or saving the energy, really makes a huge difference for this life. And many young people now use eco applications to track their carbon footprint, and they sometimes join online communities for low waste living. And it's quite inspiring to see them, some people donating, volunteering, and raising awareness about the climate crisis, especially during the recent wildfires in Gyeongbokgung province several months ago. And after all, there's no point watering your pot if the forest is burning.
Right, so thinking about the big picture and looking for ways we can lend a helping hand.
And make a huge difference.
What do you suggest, Sang-yeol?
Well, the recent wildfire cases in and out of Korea have definitely made many people to feel heartbroken, and they've caused devastating impacts to communities, nature, and countless lives. So in response, many members of the MZ generation have stepped up, volunteering their time, donating for recovery efforts, or raising awareness on their social media platforms. Their actions reflect a growing sense of social responsibility and solidarity in the face of climate related disasters. And at the same time, these tragic events serve as a powerful reminder that even a small mistake like unattended campfire or discarded cigarettes could lead to wildfire. So it's a call for all of us to stay vigilant and aware, knowing that prevention often starts from a simple everyday action.
Right, because small steps can lead to a big change. And that's all we have for News Generation today, but we will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks to Kwon Ji-yeon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and Im Sang-yeok.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you, and to our viewers, thank you for spending time with us, and we'll be waiting for you here tomorrow morning. We are News Generation.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat.